Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. We are live on Zoom. There we go. Thank you, Rita. We are live with our amazing virtual studio audience, and we are in for a treat today. We have got a couple of words on Parshat Emor, first of all. Which is it's the penultimate week of Vayikra, but that's because next week we have a double parsha, which is my bar mitzvah sedra, B'ha b'chukotai. That'll be next week, all being well. But this week, Parshat Emor, back into a single parsha for a change, and primarily Parshat Emor talks about Kohanim and different laws regarding Kohanim and different conditions that have to be met for them to be able to serve in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple or in the Mishkan, and different portions that they are entitled to, like teruma, which would be an amount of produce that gets separated and tithed when farmers are reaping their produce. And if you go through it, there's a whole bunch of different mitzvot and different laws and different requirements and different restrictions that are placed on Kohanim, not because they're better than us, but they are nonetheless better than us. And and so there are different restrictions and additional restrictions that are placed on Kohanim. One of the reasons why they are entitled to this treatment is because, for example, at the sin of the golden calf, they were the ones that stood up for Hashem instead of getting involved with it. And there have been other occasions where it was the Kohanim who maintained their integrity, maintained their loyalty, and as a result of that, they are the priestly group who have these additional rules and regulations, and they get the honor of serving in the Beit HaMikdash. We also go through the different festivals of the Jewish calendar, Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. And then we talk at the end of the parsha about the menorah and the showbread, the 12 loaves of bread that were left inside the Beis HaMikdash each week or inside the Mishkan each week. And they were as fresh the following Shabbos as they were the previous week. It was a miracle. It happens to mine. Shira makes them. What do you mean? But actually, Canteen. There's, I find, still soft Wednesday, Thursday time. So yeah, there's the secret, I guess. So okay, well there you go then. There you go. That's the secret. And then the final piece is a short story about a blasphemer. Not very nice. And in several months, when we get to our bigger picture, series on Parshat Emor, I'm sure that will come up. But you haven't. I have a cousin called Shlomit. I don't know what to tell you. Don't know what to tell you. Distant cousin. They didn't consult me for the name. Well, I'll tell you something else as well. There is a rabbi who says that people should not call a child matan for a similar reason, because matan in Tanakh was an unsavory character. So yeah, and I've met a lot of matans. So there you go. So Well, once upon a time, there were a lot, as we talked about in the Mishnayot in Pirkei Avot, there were a lot of people called Yishmael. There were a lot of people called Yishmael, but before it became a popular name in the Muslim world, it was a used name. So there's a Rabbi Yishmael that we've encountered. So also interestingly, this week the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem and the mitzvah of Chilul Hashem appear in this week's parsha. So there we go, guys. Kiddush Hashem, which is to sanctify God's name through our actions and for the world to see us in a positive light. And they look at us and they say, "Oh, I want to be just like him, or I want to be just like her. Look how well behaved they are, and look what a good example they set for the Jewish people." So we all want to strive for being a Kiddush Hashem, and God forbid to be a Chilul Hashem, and to desecrate God's name and the Jewish people with our actions. So there's a little bit on Parshat Emor. And now we do come to the actual penultimate Mishnah of chapter 4. How exciting, guys! It's only a short one because we did all of this one last week, didn't we? About the looking at the inside of the container, not just the externals, when it comes to people who we learn from. Don't judge a book by its cover. That's right. I can see you. Well, let me do that. What does that help? I've spotlighted myself. Okay, so the truth is, this is a short Mishnah, and it's not impossible and unreasonable that we'll be able to move on to the next one. But I anticipate that actually we'll end up talking for a while about this. So let's see how it goes. We're very flexible, aren't we, guys? Who would like to read for us number 21 on the screen, number 28 in our books? Thank you very much, Peter. So we'll read it in the Hebrew just because it's so short as well. Rabbi Elazar hakapa omer hakina v'hatava v'hakavod motziin es ha'adam min ha'olam. Rabbi Elazar hakapar, which I don't know what hakapar means, but it's the only place in the Mishnah where his name is mentioned, although he does appear in other places in the Talmud and I think in Midrash as well. So he says kina, which we would translate as jealousy or envy, taiva or taiva, which we would just translate as lust or desire, v'hakavod, and honor, motziin es adam min haolam. They remove a person from this world. Lahotzi is to take out. So that's our Mishnah. Give you a moment to digest. Any comments or questions? Very good. What are our options, Peter? These are all great suggestions. Let's see what people think. Ah, yes, that is true. That's an astute observation. Okay, that's how Peter's taken it. Shunned by God. Anyone want to challenge? Agree? Okay, go on. Yeah. So is your question that only a person who is immersed in these three reprehensible traits, let's call them, is it only someone who is immersed in all three that is removing themselves from the world, or is it if if a person suffers from envy or a person suffers from tava on their own, are they also removing from the world? Is that what you're asking, or do you mean is there an actual causative link between the three? Hmm. Hmm. Excellent question as well. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of this, guys. We're doing a great job here. Gotta say. Okay, well we haven't fleshed out our options over here, have we? Of what it means to be taken out of the world. We And the thing that he had done, does it fit under any of these three categories? Perhaps his motivator. Okay, very good. I'm going to come on to what Paul was saying actually in just a second, but let's start with a couple of prefaces, a couple of introductory remarks to this. So first and foremost, um, for Rabbi Elazar Hakapar to say these three words without any qualification, right, would lead us to conclude, much as we do with our Chumash series on a Monday night, that we are seeing three concepts here and needing to understand the root of these three concepts. If we're not being given any qualification, right? So he would seem to be saying that the depth of these three traits, the essence of these three traits, at their most extreme, can lead a person. We've touched along certainly um, one of the interpretations of removing a person from this world, which is that at their most extreme, a person is just not able to function in the way that the rest of us will be able to. So, um, someone who is extremely uncontrollable, they have an uncontrollable lust, they have uncontrollable jealousy, they're constantly frustrated and disappointed, they are constantly begrudging of people who don't give them enough honor. So at their most extreme, um, they're not able to function in a healthy way in this world. The Vilna Gaon compares it to drinking salt water. Right, you're drinking water, but it's never going to quench your thirst because it's the wrong kind. So kina at its most extreme, envy, jealousy, it's not going to be a good thing. But as Paul was pointing out, jealousy and envy when it comes to wisdom, or envy to the point of motivating you to be better, that would not seem to be where Rabbi Elazar Hakapar is going with this. And there are sources in Jewish sources which talk about the quality of what we call kinat sofrin, jealousy of or envy of those who are wise. That is seen as a good trait in Judaism. So that's not what Rabbi Elazar is talking about. Jealousy of wisdom is a good thing. If envy is motivating you, then that could be a good application of the envy. But an envy which is constantly making you feel begrudging of other people and seeing the world as half empty, like we were talking about before. So if it's a trait which is bringing out the worst in you, then it's motzi et hadam min haolam. It is taking you out of being able to function. But when I was looking at this, I don't think it's saying that a person who has all three is removed from the world. I think it's any of these three has the capacity at their most extreme to really just spoil a person's life, to ruin their day, ruin their perspective, and they can never feel at peace with the world around them because they are so hung up and so focused on these urges. I'm sure it can be, and a person suffering from a mental illness. would probably agree with the sentiment that they don't feel like they are functioning with the world in the way that others would be. Um, I'm not sure that he is. I'm not sure that he is inarticulate. I think he is cautioning us on the importance of recognizing how these traits can impact on us. Not everybody who experiences envy and jealousy has a mental illness. Not everybody who has a lust and an urge or an addiction is necessarily in the category of somebody who is mentally ill. We have these traits within us, and they are components to a person's personality, which we have to pay attention to, and which we have to veer away from, and which we have to have under our control rather than have them control us. So I'm not sure that it's I'm not so sure that I agree with you. But we don't wake up in the morning and move to the extreme. The arrival at the extreme is a gradual process. I will come to you, Rita. The road to the extreme is a gradual process, and uh, I don't think that the purpose of the Mishnah is to spell out every part of that process, because for different people it will be different. Everyone will have their own steady decline to these points, but we have to be aware of them, and then I think it is a part of it to be able to discuss it, so that for each individual they can see the steps that may present themselves as a challenge to them in their own lives that may lead them down that path. One one person will have a lust or an addiction to um, promiscuity, and another one may have one to gluttony, and another one will have it to I don't know, gambling, narcotics, alcohol, whatever it is that you are craving and lusting and is occupying your every waking thought. Even if it doesn't start like that, it reaches that point eventually. Um, so you can't concisely capture all of that with a multitude of examples, but you can concisely cover everything with three very broad terms: kina, tava, and kavod. However, that manifests itself for each individual, that's going to be for them to explore. Rita, yeah. Ah, so is that what we're saying? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Um, a lot of the interpretations would seem to indicate that what we're talking about here is not the ending of life, but that the life is not in a good place. So if a person is um, living a life where every waking moment is about one thing and one thing only, and that thing is negative, and that thing is bad for them or bad for other people. So that's how I take in the main what it means to be out, to be taken out of the world. Like, you're not able to function, you're not able to live in a healthy way within society, because you are just so focused on these very negative expressions of these traits, and life just isn't the same. That's in the main how that phrase gets interpreted. It also gets interpreted in the sense of that you are being taken out of the world to come, the olam haba, which is where a person may lose their share in the world to come because of the actions and the sins that they might be doing as a result of these three very strong emotional forces. And Martin was alluding to that as well, how somebody who may seem so decent and yet they get so captured by a particular drive and a particular force, and it leads them into doing things that you just never would have expected of them. I think that's the very danger of these three traits that the Mishnah is trying to raise the awareness of. Joy. Oh, Rita. I I can see that. I don't think Rabbi Elazar's looking for an editor, but yes, I think what we need to be able to interpret it. I think that's a fair interpretation. Yes. Right. Yeah. Let's hear Joy. Mm, mm. As a rule, the Mishnah and also the verses in the Torah, they are all terse, concise, and they don't waste words. So I think for precisely that reason, we have to delve, we have to search, we have to explore, we have to talk, we have to discuss, we have to ask, we have to listen. It's all a part of understanding. Joe? Oh, that's a good word. Good phrase. Yeah. We have Ezehu Kavod Hakovesh et Yitzra. We have a person who is strong is not necessarily a person with loads of muscles like me, but actually a person who's able to suppress their negative inclinations and their evil inclinations, and rise above that. We do have that, yeah. Um, yeah, yeah. Peace of mind is a good phrase which I wish I had been able to articulate. Um, Muck is a freezer, I think. Um, I'll leave you to Google Translate it for us, or I'll try that at the end. Um, so, bum. So yeah, let's let's explore something. So envy, we've talked about that. If a person is wrapped up in begrudging other people, then that's not a great motivator. But if a person is envious of another person, which motivates you, then maybe that is a good thing. We talk about different types of jealousy. Am I jealous or envious that this person has that item and I don't have it? And am I then thinking to myself, he doesn't deserve to have it, I should have that? That's a really negative expression of envy. Am I jealous? I think he should have it. I wish I had that as well. Well, that could motivate you. That could motivate you, in which case maybe it's not so bad. So there's different types of jealousy and different types of envy. Am I envious of the person at the expense of what they have? Can I not be happy for the fact that they have it? Or do I feel like they don't deserve that? What ridiculous thing that they've got that thing. I should have that thing. It's not for them to have it. That is a very negative manifestation of envy. And with ta'ava as well, if a person is hungry for something good, if you are hungry for success for the right reasons, then that's one thing. But if a person is lusting after a very promiscuous lifestyle, or a very unhealthy lifestyle, these things are not good. The Gemara talks about how our cravings, so that there's a phrase in the Gemara which goes like this in reference to satisfying a yetzer, satisfying an urge. If you starve it, it's satisfied, but if you satisfy it, then it is starved. If you constantly give in to negative impulses and negative urges, then you're just going to constantly be craving that again and again and again and again. But if you restrain and you hold back from indulging in things that you shouldn't indulge in and things which are not good for you, be it physically, emotionally, spiritually, then you will eventually reach a point where you can master it and where you can control it. So there is a dangerous side to ta'ava. I mean, let's be honest, we're seeing constant news articles about people who have made mistakes because of their ta'ava, or because of their kina, or because of their kavod. There was a phrase that I came across, the way that Rabbi Wine put it in the book that I was reading: if not for concern over his honor, a person would be content to eat whatever is at hand, to clothe himself with whatever will cover him, and to dwell in a house which will protect him from the elements. He would obtain his livelihood with little effort, and would feel no need to exert himself to become rich. But in order not to see himself as lower or lesser than his friends, he places a yoke upon his neck, and there is no end to his labors. So if we strip away everything and just focus on the nugget that is kavod, that is honor, most of what we do in our lives is because of honor. Now, if that is tamed, and if that is coming from a good motivator, then that's one thing. But if a person becomes greedy because they want to have honor in this world, if they are chasing after luxuries because, God forbid, should they appear lesser in their friends or their peers' eyes, or in their esteem, then it's going to drive people to go down routes which they shouldn't go down. And that doesn't necessarily mean breaking rules. But again, if your mind becomes so encompassed and everything is about needing to present yourself in a certain way, so the fact that we go down these paths and we are just utterly consumed by one thing and one thing only, that my peers should think that I'm a this and my friends should think that I'm a that, and God forbid, I've got to have a bigger house than my sibling because otherwise they're doing better than me, and mummy and daddy love them more than me, whatever it is, we're chasing after things which is rooted in kavod. And that's the point here. What are your intentions? What are your motivators? What is that the root of the things that we do? because if it's clouding your judgment and clouding your mind and consuming you for every waking hour, you can't actually live. And that's the point. You're not living. You're satisfying or trying to satisfy something which will never be satisfied. There's always going to be someone richer than you. There's always going to be someone who's got more than you. There's always going to be someone who you think gets more honor or gets treated better than you do. And so if you're constantly pinning yourself against these people, what kind of a life is that? We have to learn to be settled and to feel good and feel comfortable and feel confident with what we have. And I believe that is the main thrust of where Rabbi Elazar is going with his words. There's an interesting observation made by a rabbi called Rabbi Chaim from Volozhin in Lithuania, and he notes that these three urges go in chronological order, and they'll present themselves to us at different times in our life. From birth, we're not necessarily consumed with needing to be honored, right? But we are sometimes consumed by looking at what other people have. I see this with my own young children. If one of them gets a piece of birthday cake from a birthday party, oi, 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 oi. How come he gets and I don't get? What's going on over here? This is so unfair. So as children, we're definitely faced with the temptation of jealousy. But they're normally not um, being challenged in areas of lust. That usually comes as one approaches maturity, and the prospect of relationships with people around us starts to become more challenged by the passions and the urges that come along with being around other people. So lust, tava, craving after different types of food or after different temptations, that develops as a person matures into teenage and early adulthood. And the desire for honor can often come later in life. It might not present itself until you're already down the line and needing the to be held in the esteem of those around us. And also as a person reaches later years, very often uh, they can be consumed with the need to make an impact and make a difference and feel at the end of their life like they have made a change, made an impact, made a difference, and achieved something in their life. So that is all rooted in kavod as well. So we have to be careful with these things. We're not saying that these things are universally terrible, but if they take us down a path where we are not able to maintain a sense of balance and a sense of perspective and a sense of pride in what we do and satisfaction with what we do, then they can overcome and they can overcome and they can occupy people's minds in a way which isn't healthy and which isn't balanced and which isn't stable. Um, any comments or questions before a couple of other pieces? No. Okay. I don't think Rabbi Elazar is saying that people are evil, and that's not what he's saying. Someone who's jealous and someone who's lustful and someone who has honor is evil. That's not what he says. I mean, specifically, or most appropriately, a person who is suffering from mental illness and they cannot function. Why is that inconsistent with what he's saying? They're literally removed. They're removed from functional society. Well, I think that these things exist in the Torah, but we may never have had the social awareness to be able to understand them in that way. I mean, off the top of my head, we see examples with King Saul, for example, who very clearly went through bouts of depression, and that is talked about. Um, David was employed as his musician or whatever to try and lift his spirits. So there's definitely issues of mental health that are very much there in the Torah. But if we never have explored the stories with those lenses before, then we've not necessarily extracted all of the wisdom that lies within these stories to be able to give us the tools that we need to help people who are um, suffering from these things. And that coupled with the societal pressures to suppress these issues and not to talk about them means that we've got a lot of ground to make up now. But the wisdom is there. Yeah, correct. Rabbi Feldman is one such individual. Um, but you know, if you go through the stories in the Torah, there's enough going on in there that we could turn around and say there's nothing new in this generation, meaning that if all of this stuff has happened before, it means that the secrets that we need to help people are ultimately in the Torah as well. We just need to dig deep and piece it together and extract it. That's right. I remember a story about that a rabbi once told, that he was asked to go and visit in the middle of nowhere in America, a girl who was in rehab, and she had a horrendous backstory involving sexual abuse, and no one had been able to get through to her. And he was called in. He had no psychological training per se or qualification, but he had built a reputation as someone who was able to engage with teenagers, especially who had struggled with backgrounds of abuse. And he was asked to speak to her. She wouldn't speak to anybody, and somehow by him sitting with her and talking about the episode with Dinah in the book of Bereshit, who was violated, that opened her up, and she was able to start talking about her own issues and start on a road to recovery. Now that doesn't mean that's the only thing that the Torah has to say, but the point is that the Torah in that instance was the springboard that led to the person being able to realize that she wasn't the only one who had experienced what she was going through, and that sparked her ability to go down a journey that led to her recovery. So in all of these instances, the episodes in the Torah, they're not just there for stories; they're there to teach us things, and there's every reason to suggest that these stories and this wisdom can help people suffering from mental illness. But as I said, we've got hurdles to overcome where issues of mental illness were historically suppressed and ignored and misdiagnosed, and so there's a lot of ground that we still need to do to a lot of ground that we still need to cover to be able to make these conversations actually acceptable and happen. So it's all there ultimately. Um, so yeah, I think, but again, we don't want to run the risk of seeing this Mishnah and saying, oh yes, these three things can lead to mental illness, because that then does a disservice to all of us regular folk who need the constant reminder for ourselves. I'm not saying that I'm a regular folk, but I'm just saying that people that don't necessarily end up with a diagnosed mental health condition, right? People that struggle with these things, not all of them would be classified as people with mental health issues, right? So we have to all realize that this is a universal set, a universal grouping of urges and temptations and struggles that people will have in life, and the more that you give into them, the more difficult it becomes to function. Um, there are the examples are so that they're all around us. A person who gets addicted to alcohol, gets addicted to narcotics, that it starts off well, and this is what I was saying before as well. Like, you don't start off at the extreme, you get led into the extreme. Technological addictions as well. Oh yeah, I could turn this off when I want to, but actually I'm finding that more and more difficult. It is more difficult to peel ourselves away from devices, and that's a manifestation of ta'ava, of a craving, of a lust, of an urge, and and you can literally end up not engaging with the world. I remember reading a story a few years ago about a couple in, I think, South Korea, who um, who ignored and neglected their child, who ended up dying from malnourishment. Why? Because they had become so engrossed and obsessed with a computer game called Second Life, which had taken over their lives. They became obsessed with building a virtual reality life, and it occupied every waking moment of their lives. And as a result of that, their child was neglected and ended up dying from malnourishment. These are the extremes, but they don't start off like that. It starts off like, okay, let's check out a couple of Facebook profiles and let's check out a couple of YouTube videos. And before you know it, you've lost 6 hours of your life because you've just gone from one video to the next, binge watched one series to the next. If a person sits and watches Netflix all day, we can say, oh, there's nothing wrong with watching TV and there's nothing wrong with watching films. But if they've ended up doing that for 18 hours, they're not in the world. They've taken themselves out of the world. Surely, haven't they? I don't know. They're becoming infatuated and obsessed with lives that are not their own. They've taken themselves out of their own world. If we are so constantly obsessed with what this celebrity is getting up to on social media and that friend is getting up onto on social media, and we become infatuated and obsessed and spending every waking moment. And if this isn't resonating with you guys, you should know that this is a thing. Teenagers spend hours on social media watching videos of other people playing computer games or watching other people review films and TV. So then it's one step removed. It's not even that kids are addicted to playing games. They're addicted to watching other people play games. It's already like another step removed from reality. And that's all a manifestation of ta'ava. And people who spend their lives building perfect social media accounts, is that not a manifestation of kavod? The need for likes, the need for followers, the need for people to comment. This is dangerous turf, that we have to be alert to, and we have to be aware of, and we have to realize when kids or adults or friends or family are becoming embroiled in those worlds. It takes active effort to pull ourselves away from it, and if we don't realize that it's a problem, then you lose touch. Yeah. It's not only that, you don't realize when you start what the pitfalls are. If you try telling a teenager, don't bother watching this and don't bother watching that, they're never going to listen to you, right? Because we and adults as well, we justify these things. Oh, a little bit here and a little bit there, and before you know it, 6 hours later, 12 hours later, 18 hours later, you haven't left the screen, you haven't left the computer, you haven't left the casino, you haven't, whatever it is. It starts small. So it's not just a cautioning against extremism, It's a caution against being alert to the little bit as well that you allow yourself, the little bit of the indulgence, because the little bit of the indulgence can very rapidly lead to extremism. And yeah, no, I think I was basically full stopping. Mhm. Yeah. But when you're in it, you don't realize that you're taking it to an extreme. That's the challenge here. We can look at it if we're not struggling with one of these things that we see other people struggling, we look at it and we say it's an extreme. They see it as, what do you mean? I'm in control. I could stop whenever I want, and all these things. So one person's extreme is another person's daily routine. It's and that's why I don't think it's just a caution against the extreme. It's being mindful, being alert, and being open and vulnerable and willing to actually see how these things can impact on our lives and infiltrate drip by drip. There's a rabbi called the Novominsker Rebbe who says that we're trying to translate this takes a person out of the world. So the Novominsker Rebbe would say that it's taking you out of reality. You lose touch with reality, and you enter into a psychological world of fantasy with these things. If you are a jealous person, then you become very paranoid as you become so anxious and uncertain with everything around you. Um, we've talked about lust and how that can destroy your life. It can destroy your career just for a cheap thrill. Um, Someone who is obsessed with glory, with honor, when taken too seriously, you become deluded by your grandeur. There's stories all over the internet about people who try and get themselves discounts or free merchandise or whatever it is, with the promise of, well, I'll be able to get you exposure to my thousands or millions of followers. Like that's become a currency now. So you get these obscene situations with social media influencers going into restaurants demanding free food, and the restaurant owners are like, what on earth are you talking about? It's like, you can't treat me like this. Do you know how many followers I've got? Do you know how much exposure I've got on the internet? I'm going to tell everyone about you. I'm going to write bad reviews. Like, you're a nobody. Excuse me. You're a nobody. You don't deserve honor. You don't deserve grandeur. Who do you think you are? And so we can become so enamored with ourselves and so self-obsessed and just lose complete grasps of reality. One of the other ideas I heard as well is that jealousy or wishing you were somebody else, right? You're literally taking yourself out of the world. If you are trying to live somebody else's life, then you are no longer Nick Kett. You are whoever it is, the celebrity or friend that you're trying to emulate. You're now removing your own identity and transplanting it onto somebody else, Mark II. Yeah, you've taken yourself out of the world. What's happened to Nick? If you lose your own sense of self, then who are you in the world? So that's another interesting thing as well. Is that you can completely lose your identity because you're trying to be something that you're not, or trying to be somebody else, or live a life that's beyond your means. That's not the life that we were supposed to lead. We're trying to lead somebody else's life. So it can literally take you out of the world because you don't exist anymore. You now identify as something that's not you. Joe. Yeah. It takes so much for a person to realize when they need to stop something, doesn't it? It's and sometimes people don't realize it until they're rock bottom. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the same with when we get obsessed with these things as well. You know, I screen time is uh, is definitely one of the manifestations of this problem. Definitely, social media. Yeah. And just sorry, go on. Mhm. If I can just finish off with one piece about this, okay? Because Peter was getting a bit nervous before that the implication of this is that we're trying to say that people are evil. I don't think that's the driver of the Mishnah here, right? We this is if anything, this Mishnah is amazing because it starts the conversation. It's not about that you become evil by going down these routes. It's that if you never realize that these are pitfalls and you never realize that these traits exist and can take you to places which are not good for your life, not good for your soul, not good for your social interactions, then it can be too late. We have to realize that these are powerful emotions, these are powerful urges, and to dismiss it and just say, okay, but a little bit here, it's not such a bad thing. We have to be mature enough to realize the pitfalls of the decisions that we make, or the decisions that we make for others. I've mentioned before um, that when it came to my kids' screen time, right, it got to a point where our eldest was like walking around like looking for her next fix, right, and couldn't function with any other activity unless it was involving a screen. So we can say it's not that bad if kids watch TV, but actually it paves the road for an unhealthy addiction, which if we're not mature enough to at least engage in the conversation, then we blindly let things happen without realizing the consequences. Kids being given phones at the age of 8 or the age of 10 or the age of 11, whatever it is. We can't put a blanket rule and say children shouldn't have mobile devices, but if you don't set up some kind of framework where it manages the way in which they use these devices, then it will lead to excessive screen time, which will lead to them being out of the world. You wonder why you can't have a conversation with a teenager. Is it a surprise if they're spending their life entirely engrossed in a device? They're not in your world. That's exactly what the Mishnah is saying. That they're not in the world. So we have to be cautious, and we have to be careful, and we have to be realistic, and we have to be pragmatic, and we have to be vulnerable, and we have to be open to discussing these things. Um, and and I don't think as a society we really do that. Um, and this isn't about just yeah. And we also have to be clear as well. We can't we're not trying to judge people with this. We're just trying to highlight that at the root of these realities is one of those three urges: jealousy, lust, honor. It lies at the root of all of these manifestations that we've been talking about. And yeah, so yeah, I've also seen that, and I've seen tantrums if something's taken away, or if they don't get the same as somebody else. And I've seen tantrums with adults as well, not just with children. That's the thing. It permeates every single one of us at every different possible time of our life, and in different levels of severity. But if we turn a blind eye to it, then we'll never wake up to it. So this is actually one of my favorite Mishnayot in all of Pirkei Avot. Um, mhm. Yeah, I was a leader back in 2007, 2008. I was a leader on an ACE trip, and there was a boy. He was the sweetest boy. Excellent behavior. He was like a 17, 18-year-old kid, and he was such a mensch, right? You look at his behavior, no problems whatsoever. The trouble was he was obsessed with his camera. Right? This was before everyone was addicted to smartphones and all the rest of it. All he had a very, very nice camera, and but he lived his life behind the lens. So even before all of this, these problems have existed at every single point in our history. Where you become fascinated and obsessed, or whatever it is, but you can end up not living your life. That's the point here: is living your life and not living it for someone else, because of someone else, because of something else. We have to learn how to be ourselves, be comfortable with ourselves, live our own experiences, live them for ourselves, before we can figure everything else out. It's all part of it. It's not only my generation or my kids' generation who are obsessed with watching screens. This has gone on since my dad was a kid, when TVs were invented. Oh, my dad's turned off now. Oh, that's a shame. Um, but I've mentioned before that I love reading this rabbi from New York who was speaking in the 1950s. He talks about teenagers being obsessed with watching TV. He only had one channel back then, and yet people have always suffered with these same concerns and societal issues. But if we never talk about them, then we can never be aware of them, and we can never be alert to them, and then we can never prepare for them, and then we can never be resilient, when these issues arise, because we've never discussed it. So, as we say in Hebrew, ad kan for today. Until here. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody watching on YouTube and Facebook. And we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom for when it comes. Have a wonderful and meaningful day.